Jamie's 21-year-old son, London, also waits.
In a highly charged and emotional courtroom scene, the son of Jamie Thomas Flowers, a woman who tragically lost her life in a violent crime, attempted to confront the man convicted of her murder, Vashon Flowers.
The court officers are on this guy. I mean, he doesn't quite get to the defendant.
He continues to inch forward, and it takes every ounce of strength from all of these deputies to keep inching him backward.
The incident unfolded during the sentencing hearing of Flowers, who had been found guilty of fatally shooting Jamie in 2019. The courtroom, already somber with the weight of the trial's conclusion, turned chaotic when the victim's son, unable to contain his emotions, jumped over the courtroom barrier and rushed toward Vashon Flowers in a moment of overwhelming grief. Jamie Thomas Flowers was a 50-year-old mother and resident of Muskegon Heights, Michigan. Her life was abruptly cut short on May 19, 2019, when she was fatally shot in her own home, a crime that shocked both her family and the local community. Vashon Flowers, identified as the shooter, was arrested and charged with her murder. The trial, which followed a lengthy investigation, revealed the tragic details of the case. Flowers was ultimately convicted in 2020 and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. On the day of the sentencing, tensions were palpable as family members gathered to hear the judge's final ruling. The conviction of Vashon Flowers had already brought some measure of justice for Jamie's family, but the emotional impact of her death remained raw. The courtroom was filled with people who had followed the case closely, including Jamie's son, who had struggled throughout the trial to cope with the loss of his mother. As the judge began to deliver the sentence, Jamie's son, deeply affected by months of grief and emotional exhaustion, acted impulsively. Without warning, he leapt over the courtroom barrier that separated the gallery from the legal proceedings and sprinted toward the defendant, Vashon Flowers. The young man's actions were fueled by the unimaginable grief of losing a parent in such a violent and senseless way. Before he could reach Flowers, courtroom security officers intervened, quickly restraining him and preventing any further escalation. The outburst, though brief, was a stark reminder of the deep emotional wounds left by the crime. Video footage of the incident captured the raw, emotional moment as the young man attempted to approach Flowers, his face a mixture of anger and pain. Security personnel responded swiftly, escorting the son out of the courtroom to ensure the hearing could continue without further disruption. The emotional scene underscored the immense toll the trial had taken on Jamie's family, who had been grappling with the reality of her death for over a year. The trial itself had revealed the disturbing details of the crime. On May 19, 2019, Vashon Flowers entered Jamie Thomas Flowers' home in Muskegon Heights and shot her multiple times. The reasons behind the crime, though explored during the trial, remained secondary to the devastating loss experienced by Jamie's loved ones. For them, the trial had been a long and painful process, one that did little to lessen the emotional weight of their loss. The evidence presented during the proceedings, however, made it clear that Vashon Flowers was responsible for Jamie's death, leading to his conviction for first-degree murder. The sentence of life in prison without parole brought a legal conclusion to the case, but it did little to soothe the emotional scars left on Jamie's family. For her son, the courtroom was not merely a place for legal closure, but a space where his overwhelming grief reached its breaking point. The pain of losing a loved one to violence can manifest in many ways, and in this case, it surfaced as an impulsive act during a highly emotional moment. His attempt to confront the man responsible for his mother's death reflected the depth of his suffering. Although the courtroom incident was brief, it highlighted the human cost of violent crime. For the families of victims, the legal process can feel like an inadequate substitute for the loved one they have lost. While the justice system aims to hold perpetrators accountable, it cannot fully address the emotional toll borne by those left behind. The courtroom is a place where legal resolutions are made, but for the victims' families, it can also be a place where the weight of their grief becomes overwhelming. Following the incident, courtroom officials restored order, and the sentencing hearing continued as planned. The judge imposed the life sentence on Vashon Flowers, a punishment that would ensure he would remain behind bars for the rest of his life. While the sentence provided some degree of justice, it was clear that the emotional wounds inflicted on Jamie's family would not be easily healed. The case of Jamie Thomas Flowers serves as a stark reminder of the long-lasting effects of violent crime. Not only does it claim the life of the victim, but it also leaves a trail of grief, trauma, and emotional suffering in its wake.